The penny's been gone in this country since 2013, so it actually took me a second to work out how to send my father exactly 1 cent. You can't hand someone a penny in Canada anymore, but you can sure send one over Interac. I sat in a vinyl recliner at the foot of my son's hospital bed at 3 in the morning, typed in the amount, $0.01 real, and hit send. Then I closed every account my family had ever touched. My phone, my hydro, my brother's whole life. All of it. And I want to tell you exactly how it happened. Because the part you're imagining, the screaming, the slammed doors, that comes later and it's better than you think. Stick with me to the end. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from because I'm always curious who's out there. My son's name is Felix, he's 5. He was born with a hole in his heart, a ventricular septal defect, plus a valve that never closed the way it should have, and for the first 4 years of his life, we managed it with appointments and medication and a cardiologist at Sick Kids who knew us by our first names. Then last autumn, the numbers stopped looking the way they were supposed to look, and Dr. Wexler sat me down in a small beige room and told me Felix needed an open heart repair, and that it was a long surgery, and that it was the kind of surgery where they tell you about the risks because they're legally obligated to and because they're real. We're in Toronto. My family is in Hamilton, 45 minutes down the QEW on a clear day. I tell you that distance on purpose. Remember it. The night before, I sent a message to the family group chat. It's me, my mother, my father, and my younger brother, Dominic, in there. Plus a rotating cast of forwarded minion memes my mother thinks are hilarious. I wrote, Felix surgery is tomorrow morning. They're saying 8 to 10 hours. I'm scared. Could really use you guys. My mother replied with a string of folded hands emojis and praying so hard, sweetheart. My father wrote, keep us posted. Dominic liked the message. Just the little thumbs up. That was it. I got to the hospital at 5:30 in the morning. They let me walk beside the gurney down the hall, my hand on Felix's, until the doors where I wasn't allowed to follow. He had a stuffed beaver he'd named Beaver because he is 5 and naming things is not yet his strength, and he held it against his chest and looked up at me with his face doing that brave thing kids do where they're more worried about you than themselves. Mom, are you gonna wait the whole time? The whole time, Bug. I'll be right here when you wake up. The doors swung shut. A light over them clicked on. I went and found a chair in the surgical family lounge and I sat down to wait. There's a particular quality to hospital waiting that I don't think you understand until you've done it. Time doesn't move. It puddles. By 8 in the morning, the Tim Hortons coffee I grabbed downstairs had gone cold and acidic in my stomach, and I checked my phone for the 10th time and there was nothing. By 11, a volunteer came around with a cart and asked if I wanted a granola bar, and I said yes just to have a human being acknowledge me, and I held the granola bar without opening it for 2 hours. I had a friend who offered. I want to say that because I know what you're thinking. Didn't she have anybody? My coworker Nadia texted me at 9 that she could leave work and come sit with me, and I told her not to because she has her own kids and a commute from Mississauga, and I genuinely thought my own mother would walk through those doors any minute. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I told the person who'd have actually shown up not to come because I was saving the chair for the people who never would. At 1 in the afternoon, I texted the group chat halfway update from the OR. It's complicated, but he's stable. Long way to go yet. Nothing. At 2, I did the thing you should never do in a hospital waiting room, which is open social media. My mother had posted 40 minutes earlier. A photo of her backyard, the maple turning, with the caption, God's beauty everywhere if you just look. My brother had posted too. A story, the kind that disappears, and it caught it before it did. Dominic and his fiancée Camille at a brunch place on Locke Street in Hamilton. Mimosas raised, her in sunglasses indoors, the caption celebrating big things to come. Ichthosed, geotagged. 45 minutes away, while my son's chest was open on a table. I closed the phone and I put it face down on the chair beside me and I looked at the wall where somebody had hung a print of a canoe on a lake, the kind of art they buy by the gross for places where people are quietly falling apart, And I thought, with a clarity that scared me a little, they are not coming. Not because they can't, because we're not worth the drive. The surgeon came out at 4:30. Blue scrubs, mask pulled down, the exhaustion of someone who'd had his hands inside a child's heart all day. Renata for Felix. I stood up so fast the room tilted. Is he okay? He's okay. And the breath I'd been holding since 5:30 that morning came out of me in a sound I didn't recognize. The defect was bigger than the imaging had shown, he said. The valve was trickier. 11 hours in the end, not the 8 to 10. But he's strong, he's stable, he's in recovery. You can see him in about an hour. I sat back down and cried into my hands, the granola bar still in my lap. And then, on autopilot, the way you do, I picked up my phone to tell my family. I typed, he's out. 11 hours. It was so hard, but he made it. He's okay. I love you all. I sent it, and then I sat there and I waited for my phone to ring, for my mother to call sobbing with relief, for my father to say they were getting in the car. The message went to read, all three of them. Read by my mother. Read by my father. Read by Dominic. No one replied. I want to be honest about what that did to me because it wasn't rage, not yet. It was something quieter and worse. It was the specific grief of a thing you've spent your whole life refusing to see finally standing in front of you with the lights on. The part of me that had spent 31 years making excuses. Mom's anxious, Dad's not a hospital person, Dominic's just immature. That part didn't get angry. It just went silent. And in the silence, I could finally hear how things actually were. I should explain who I am in this family because you need it to understand the rest. I'm the responsible one, the oldest. In my family, that was a job title, not a birth order. I was the kid who read the fine print, who did the taxes at 19, who got the call when the car broke down. My brother is 6 years younger and he came up the golden child, the funny one, the one things were forgiven for. My parents are of a generation and a mindset where the son is the legacy and the daughter is the infrastructure. Nobody said it that way. They didn't have to. When I got my first real job, I'm a financial crimes analyst. I investigate fraud for one of the big banks, which is going to matter a great deal in about 10 minutes. My first decent paycheck went to my parents' roof. When I got promoted, I took over their property taxes. When my father got pushed into early retirement at 61 with a pension that turned out to be a rumor, it was my name that went on the cosign for their condo because their savings, which I also managed, were a polite fiction. I paid for it all quietly. That's what I thought love was. I genuinely thought, somewhere underneath, that if I kept the lights on for everyone, I'd earn a place at the table. And Dominic drifted the way the forgiven do. There was the vape shop that lasted 8 months. I covered the lease break. There was the drop shipping thing where he sold leggings off Instagram and ate $4,000 in inventory. Mine. His current career was content creator, which as far as I could tell meant he and Camille took photographs of expensive food on a credit card where I was the primary account holder and they were authorized users. The card was for emergencies. Dominic's definition of emergency was patio season. Camille I'd met exactly twice. She was polished in a way that read expensive until you looked closely. Designer bag, an accent that drifted depending on who she was talking to, a job she described as brand consulting that never seemed to involve a brand or any consulting. The first time I met her at a Sunday dinner, she walked through my place like an appraiser, her eyes going over my furniture, my kitchen, my son's art on the fridge. "This is so cozy," she said. "Dominic and I are more downtown people. We're thinking King West, something with a view for entertaining." Then she talked for 20 minutes about their 5-year plan, which featured a destination wedding in Tulum and a lot of references to generational wealth, and she kept looking at me when she said it. The second time at my parents' anniversary, she cornered me by the dessert table and told me, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, "I've been going over Dominic's finances. He has so much potential, he's just not liquid." We were thinking if you could move some of his inheritance over to him now, we could really get a head start. His inheritance, I almost laughed. What inheritance? I said. I'm the one paying the mortgage on the house you think he's going to inherit. She smiled at me with her mouth and not her eyes. Don't be dramatic. Everyone knows you're the bank. You'll be fine. It's just about unlocking Dominic's potential. So that was the woman my brother was raising a mimosa to while my son was on a table. 3 days went by in the recovery ward, 11 hours of surgery, and then the long, slow climb back. The first time Felix opened his eyes, the first sip of apple juice, the first time the nurses got him to stand with the chest pillow pressed to him so it wouldn't hurt to cough. I slept in the recliner. I lived on hospital sandwiches and machine coffee. The group chat sat there with my message at the bottom. He made it, read by everyone, answered by no one. I stopped checking it after the first day. I thought I was done hoping. I wasn't, quite. There's always one last ember. It was the Wednesday afternoon. Felix was finally asleep, properly asleep, his color better, and I was working the pins and needles out of my legs when my phone buzzed on the tray table. My heart did the stupid, hopeful thing. I grabbed it. It was a text from my father. The subject line, he texts in subject lines, he's that kind of man, said, family thing. I opened it. Hi, Renata. Hope all's well with you and the little guy. Listen, your mom and I have been talking with Dominic and Camille. They've settled on Tulum for the wedding and the resort deposit is due Friday. It's a great opportunity. Camille's got connections down there. It could really open doors for them. Your mother and I are putting in for the flights, but we need you to cover the deposit. It's $6,000. Just transfer it straight to Dominic. Thanks, kiddo. Love you. I read it 3 times. Hope all's well with the little guy. Not, how did the surgery go? Not, is he alive? The little guy. A footnote. They'd waited what they clearly felt was a respectful interval, 3 whole days, before sending the invoice for the golden child's honeymoon. And something happened in my chest that I want to describe accurately, because it wasn't a snap. It was the opposite. It was a settling. A cold, flat, almost peaceful calm, the kind I get at work right before I find the thing the fraudster thought they'd hidden. Because here is what my family forgot in their total certainty that I would sigh and pay like I always paid. They forgot what I do for a living, and they forgot who held every single password. My hands were completely steady. I opened my banking app. I went to send money. I found my father's profile. I typed in the amount, and this is the part where I had to think for a second, because you can't physically hand someone a penny in this country anymore. The penny's been dead for over a decade, but the system will still let you send $0.01 or 10 to AC. So I did, 1 cent. In the memo line I wrote, for Dominic's future, that's the full amount. I hit send, and then I plugged my laptop into the wall, tethered it to my phone, and got comfortable in the recliner, because I had a few hours before my son woke up and I knew exactly how I was going to spend them. Here's the thing about my family that they never understood about me. They thought I paid the bills because I was soft. I paid the bills because I was organized. I was the administrator on everything, the phone plan, the credit card, the utilities, the streaming, every login, every autopay, every security question. I'd set all of it up over years because they couldn't be bothered to learn and they'd assumed the way you assume gravity, that it would simply keep working. I run risk for a living, and I was looking at a portfolio that was, in professional terms, completely toxic. It was time to divest. I started with the phone plan because it was elegant. We were on a Rogers family share, me, my parents, Dominic. I was the account holder. I didn't cancel Dominic's line, that's amateur hour. I initiated a port out. I moved his number, his precious creator account contact number, onto a fresh prepaid SIM under his own name, his own email, the cheapest plan they had, and I loaded it with exactly enough credit to receive 1 text telling him his payment had failed. He was, officially, his own problem now. Then the credit card. I logged in and the balance made me physically wince. Over $14,000. Recent charges, a steakhouse on King for $800, a spa in Yorkville for $450, a content shoot at a rented studio. I went into the authorized users, my father, my mother, Dominic, 3 clicks. Remove, remove. Then I paid the whole balance off out of my own checking, a final expensive goodbye, and I closed the account. A box popped up asking if I was sure. I have never in my life been more sure of anything, I told the sleeping shape of my son, and I clicked yes. Then the condo. I couldn't sell it out from under them, my name's on the mortgage, but not the deed. But every utility on that place ran through my auto pay. Toronto Hydro. They call electricity hydro here. My whole life I've called the power bill the hydro bill. Cancel auto pay. Done. Enbridge Gas. Cancel auto pay. Done. Water, internet, the Bell bundle my father needed for his sports package. Done. Done. Netflix, Disney, Crave, the Spotify family plan with all 4 of us on it. I went into each one, signed every device out, removed every member, changed every password. I had set up their smart TV. I had set up their Wi-Fi. They had never once asked how any of it worked. They just assumed the lights would stay on and the hockey would stream, and they were about to find out all at once that none of it had ever been theirs. It had been mine, on loan, out of love that they'd mistaken for obligation. And then, because I never make a move without information, I opened the tool I use at work. Not a Google search, the real thing, the licensed databases, the ones with the court records and the credit profiles and the judgments. I ran Camille. It took me 11 minutes, and what came back rearranged my whole understanding of the situation. Camille was not a brand consultant. She'd done 6 months in marketing at a firm in Hamilton before they let her go. She had a trail of dead companies, same as Dominic. But unlike my brother, she had creditors, real ones. She had over $70,000 in personal debt and 2 outstanding judgments against her in Ontario Small Claims Court for unpaid accounts. The Tillam deposit was not for a wedding. It was the exact ballpark of a settlement she was facing. She wasn't an opportunist marrying up. She was drowning, and she'd reached out in the dark and grabbed onto my family, and within 10 minutes of meeting me, she'd identified me as the thing keeping the whole raft afloat. My phone buzzed. My father again. Was that 1 cent supposed to be funny? Dominic needs the money tomorrow. We don't have time for games. We don't have time. I looked at my son, 11 hours of a surgeon's hands inside his heart, breathing on his own, and I typed back, slowly, enjoying each word. I'm a little busy, Dad, with Felix's post-op care. The care none of you asked about, not once in 3 days. The 1 cent was my contribution to Dominic's future. It's the last thing he'll ever get from me. You might want to check your credit card, and your Wi-Fi, and Dominic's phone. I sent it. And for the first time in 3 days, I smiled. Then I turned the phone face down and waited. I didn't wait long. It was still dark out, 6 to 9 in the morning, when my phone, silent for 3 days, came alive. It buzzed itself halfway across the tray table. Mom, I let it ring out. It rang out a ring, a den, immediately. I let it ring out again. Then the text started in the broken half-spelled way my mother types when she's panicking. Renata, answer the phone. Renata, what did you do? My card was declined at the Loblaws, the 24-hour one. I had to leave a full cart at the till in front of everyone. The internet's off. Your father can't get his news. Dominic just called the house from a payphone. His cell is dead. He's stranded downtown. He was supposed to meet Camille. Answer me. This is an emergency. I read that word twice. Emergency. Not the 11 hours, not my son's chest. A declined cart at the Loblaws was an emergency. I let her stew for half an hour while I helped Felix have a few careful sips of juice and the nurse checked his line. Then I called my mother back. She picked up before the first ring finished, her voice already a shriek. Renata, what is going on? Morning, Mom. I used my work voice. The one I use across a table from people who've stolen from the bank. Flat, even, almost kind. Don't you good morning me? Everything's broken. The card, the internet, Dominic's phone. What did you do? Your father is beside himself. What card, Mom? The card, the emergency card. It was declined for groceries. I was humiliated. Ah, I said. That card. I closed it. The balance was getting away from us. A choked little silence. You closed it without asking. How could you? Dominic needs that for gas. He can buy his own gas. And the internet, I have my shows. Your father has his hockey. I stopped paying the bill. You'll need to set up your own account in your own name with your own card. It's not hard. You phone Belle. I don't know how to do that, she sputtered, and there it was, the whole 31 years in one sentence. You've always done it. I know, I said. I have. I could hear my father in the background, his voice rising. What's she saying? Tell her to fix it. I can't pull up my account. I need to check my pension. And my mother, breathless, Renata, this isn't funny. Turn it all back on. And Dominic's, his phone's dead. Camille's waiting for him. He's going to lose her. You know how important this connection is for him. And that's the word that finally got past my calm. Important connection. I let it sit. Tell me, Mom. Where was Dominic's important connection on Monday? When his nephew was on an operating table for 11 hours. Where were you? Where was Dad? Silence. A thick, guilty, damning silence. We didn't want to be in the way, she said finally. And it was so thin, so insulting, that I almost laughed. You know your father doesn't do hospitals. He doesn't do hospitals, I repeated. So he couldn't sit in a waiting room for his only grandson. He couldn't send one text. But 3 days later, he found the energy to invoice me $6,000 for a honeymoon in Tulum. You don't understand, she cried. This is Dominic's future. Camille's from a good family. This is his chance. His future, I said, and the words tasted like pennies, which is funny, given. I sent him a cent for his future. That's what it's worth to me. Now listen, because I'm only saying this once. The bank is I'm only saying this once. The bank is closed, the phone, the internet, the card, the streaming, all of it. You're on your own. The way Felix and I have been on our own for the last 3 days. You can't do this, she screamed. You're abandoning your family. Abandoning you. I laughed, and it came out as that same dry, cold sound from the waiting room. You want to talk about abandonment? Let's talk about a beige chair and 11 hours and a 5-year-old who came out of anesthesia, and the first thing he did was look around the room for his grandparents. You didn't abandon me, Mom. That would mean you were there to begin with. You just forgot I existed until you needed a transfer. The transfers are over. Goodbye. I hung up. I set the phone to allow calls only from the hospital, and the silence that followed was, for the first time in my entire life, completely peaceful. I knew my mother's hysterics were just the opening. My father came next, and he came smarter. That evening, he sent a long email, a real piece of work. It opened with guilt. Your mother hasn't stopped crying. She made herself sick. It moved to wounded authority. I don't know what's gotten into you. This is childish and cruel. And it landed on the threat he thought was a trump card. You co-signed our condo, Renata. You are legally tied to this family whether you like it or not. You can't just walk away. He was right that I'm on the mortgage. He was wrong about which way that cut. I wrote back 2 lines. You're right, Dad. My name's on it, so I'll be speaking to a real estate lawyer about forcing a sale to recover my equity. I've carried that mortgage for 6 years. You and Mom should start looking at rentals. The reply came in under a minute. You wouldn't dare. I didn't bother answering. The real fallout came from Dominic once he found a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, which apparently took 2 days. My inbox filled up. The subject lines told the whole arc on their own. My phone isn't working. Camille is upset. Turn the card back on now. Dad says you're selling the condo. Are you insane? The last email was 1,000 words of nothing. He called me jealous. He called me bitter. He said I was a sad single mom trying to wreck his happiness because mine was over. He said Camille was the best thing that ever happened to him and I was ruining it out of spite. And he demanded the 6,000 plus another 2 for, and I quote, emotional damages. It would have been funny if I couldn't read the seams. The vocabulary wasn't his. Emotional damages. Defamation. Those were Camille's words in his mouth. She was writing through him and she was getting desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. My proof came the next morning. A call from the bank's fraud department, not my employer's, my own bank's, about unusual activity. Someone had tried to add an authorized user to my personal checking account. My checking, my salary, Felix's Rispart, the education fund I'd been quietly building since the day he was born. The caller had used my mother's name, had passed the first security questions, my father's birthday, the street I grew up on, but had failed at the two-step code that went to my phone. My mother had tried to give Camille a key to my son's education fund. That was the last ember, the she's just misguided one I've been protecting without admitting it. It went out. This wasn't enabling anymore. This was a coordinated attempt to rob me, run by the woman who needed 70 grand and approved by the woman who raised me. I thanked the fraud agent, locked everything down to the studs, changed every password again, and then I printed off Camille's file. The debt, the judgments, all of it, and slid it into a manila envelope and set it on my hall table. Because I knew they weren't done. I knew they had to come and see for themselves that the well was actually dry. 4 days later, they discharged Felix. Walking him through our own front door, getting him settled into his own bed with Beaver tucked under his arm, his chest healing in a long neat line he was already proud of. There is no word for that relief. I was tucking him in when the buzzer went. I knew before I looked. I went to the door and there they were on the step, not my parents, Dominic and Camille. I opened it. Dominic pushed straight past me into my front hall, rumpled and furious. Camille followed, calm, in a sharp white coat, her eyes already doing the appraisal of my home, and her expression arranged into something she probably thought looked like concern. "Renata, finally," Dominic said. "We've been trying to reach you. This has gone on long enough. Mom's a wreck. You need to fix this, and you need to apologize to Camille." I looked at Camille. She smiled, smooth and cold. "Renata, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We're all family here. I know you've been under so much stress with your son, but your parents are elderly, and what you've done is honestly cruel. You can't just cut people off." "Is that what you're here for?" I said. "To advocate for my parents." "I'm here," she said, stepping forward, and the mask slicked just a little, "because Dominic and I have a future, and you are standing in the way of it. That deposit was non-refundable. Because of you, it's gone." $6,000, I said. "Gone, just like that." "Yes," Dominic snapped, "and it's your fault, so you owe us." I let that sit for a second. Then, since we're talking about money, Camille, let's talk about money. Let's talk about the non-refundable deposit. Or should we talk about the judgment against you in St. Catherine's for $8,000? Or the $11 you owe on a line of credit that's already in collections? Because I checked the fine print, it's my whole job. The smile stayed on her face, but everything behind it died. Dominic just looked confused. "What? Camille, what's she talking about?" "She's lying," Camille said too fast. "She's jealous, Dominic. She's trying to split us up." Am I? I walked to the hall table and picked up the envelope and pulled out the pages. "Here, this is your fiancé. Over $70,000 in debt. 2 judgments. The Tulum deposit was never for a wedding. It was to keep a creditor from garnishing wages she doesn't have." Dominic took the pages. His hands were shaking. He read, "Camille, is this true?" Her face went through 3 expressions and landed somewhere reptilian. "You had no right," she hissed at me. "That's private. I'll sue you for defamation." "It's not defamation if it's true and on the public record," I said. "Get out of my house." "Dominic," she said, wheeling on him, "are you going to let her speak to me like that? She's trying to ruin us." He was staring at the papers, his whole picture of his life coming apart in his hands. "You told me your parents were rich," he said quietly. "You told me." "They're broke," Camille spat, the accent gone entirely now, something flat and hard underneath it. "Just like yours." I thought your sister was smart, but she's just a bitter spinster. I told you we should have gone straight to her bank." And then she heard herself. "Her bank," I said. "You mean the way Mom did, when she phoned my bank to try and add you to my son's education fund?" That did it. Dominic looked from her to me and back, and something in his face finally caught up to the rest of him. "Get out," he said. "What?" Camille snarled. "Get out?" He threw the papers at her feet. "You lied to me. You tried to steal from my sister. From a 5-year-old. Steal?" She laughed high and ugly. "Your whole family's been stealing from her for 20 years, you idiot. You're the biggest thief of all. You're nothing without her check." And she shoved out the door so hard, a frame jumped off my wall. Dominic stood in my front hall, breathing like he'd run a race. His eyes wet with shame and rage. He opened his mouth. "Renata, I didn't." "You should go, Dominic," I said. I was too tired to hold his apology. It weighed nothing. He looked at the floor, and then he turned and walked out, and he left the door hanging open behind him, and I watched him shuffle down my walk, a 31-year-old man who just lost everything he thought he had. I shut the door and turned the deadbolt and leaned my forehead against the cool of it. "Mom?" Felix called, thin, from his room. "Who was yelling?" I went and sat on the edge of his bed and smoothed his hair. "That was your Uncle Dominic, Bug," I said. "He won't be coming around anymore." The collapse wasn't a movie. It was slow and administrative, which felt right, since that's the language they'd always used on me. My father called a lawyer who told him, with what I imagine was professional patience, that there is no law in Ontario that makes a daughter pay her parents' bills. And yes, a co-signer on a mortgage absolutely can force a sale. So they sold the condo. The market was decent, but after the mortgage came out and my equity came back to me, what was left over for them was thin. They moved into a 1-bedroom in a seniors building out past the airport. My mother, at 66, took a part-time job at the front desk of a dental office. My father learned for the first time in a decade how to phone Belle himself. Dominic disappeared for a while. Camille? I heard through a cousin, left town entirely. Possibly the province. With nobody left to carry him, my brother moved back in with our parents and got a job in the back of a Canadian Tire. I saw him once, months later, in the rain, wrangling a snake of shopping carts across a wet parking lot in a red vest. He looked up. He saw me. He turned away, his face going red, and went back to the carts. I waited to feel something. Pity, satisfaction, anything. There was nothing there. Just rain. My own life cracked open like a window in spring. The line items in my budget that used to read Mom and Dad, Hydro, Dominic, Emergency, Family Misc got deleted, and in the space where they'd been, I wrote Felix, Rispact, and Travel, and God help me, Savings. But it was the other weight that lifted, the one I hadn't known I was carrying, the low constant hum of dread, the bracing for the next emergency text. My phone would buzz and my shoulders wouldn't climb up to my ears anymore. I hadn't known they'd been doing that for 31 years. Felix healed the way kids heal, which is to say, faster and braver than any adult would. 6 months out, Dr. Wexler put his scans up on the screen and the repair was holding beautifully, the valve doing exactly what it was supposed to do, and he told me, smiling, that Felix was cleared for normal life. Running, school, swimming, being 5, then 6, then whatever came after. That night, Felix and I sat at the kitchen table and I opened my laptop. "So," I said, "your uncle's big trip to Tulum never happened." Felix made a face, because he is loyal and he understood in the simple way kids understand that those people had not been kind to us. "Good," he said. "Well?" I turned the laptop so he could see the screen, where I had a page open. A little cabin on the west coast of Vancouver Island, all windows, the gray Pacific right outside, the kind of place where in the spring you can stand on the deck and watch the gray whales come up the coast. "You've worked so hard, I think we've earned a trip. Just us." His whole face changed, lit up the way it hadn't in a year. "Whales? Real ones?" "Real ones, Bug. As many as we can find." 2 months later, we stood on a wind-swept beach near Tofino with our boots full of sand and the cold, clean ocean air going right through us, and a guide pointed, and there it was, a long gray back rolling up out of the water and the white plume of breath hanging in the air. And Felix grabbed my hand and screamed with joy. His scar healed to a thin, pale line under his rain jacket, his heart, his strong, repaired heart, beating just fine. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for half a second, out of an old reflex, my chest went tight. I pulled it out. It was Nadia, from work, sending a photo of her dog and a toque. I laughed and texted her back, and I looked at my son, standing at the edge of a continent, healthy and shouting at a whale, and I felt something settle over me so complete it almost hurt. Not happiness exactly, bigger than that. The kind of peace that comes from finally understanding that what I'm worth was never the amount on the check. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but the freedom on the other side of it was the realest thing I've ever held, and it cost me 1 cent. For 31 years, I believed that if I just kept paying, kept fixing, kept being the one who read the fine print, my family would finally make room for me at the table. That was the lie I'd built my whole life around, and it took 11 hours in a beige chair at Sick Kids to see it for what it was. Nobody came, not because they couldn't make the drive from Hamilton, but because Felix and I had never actually counted to them. We were the infrastructure. You don't send a thank you card to the furnace. Here's what I've turned over 100 times since. Nothing that happened to Dominic and my parents was something I did to them. I didn't curse them or wish them harm. I simply stopped holding up a roof that was never mine to hold. The card got declined because the spending was real. The condo had to be sold because the equity was mine. Camille's debts surfaced because they existed. Every consequence grew straight out of a choice they'd already made. That's the part people miss when they call it revenge. It wasn't revenge. It was just the bill finally landing on the right desk. What carried me through it wasn't cruelty, and I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. It was 3 things I didn't know I had until I needed them all at once. The first was a line I wasn't willing to cross, even furious. I'd paid that credit card off in full before I closed it because the debt was mine to settle and I wasn't going to leave a mess for someone else to trip over. The second was knowing exactly how the machinery worked, the passwords and the auto-pays and the public records, so that when the moment came, I didn't flail, I acted. And the third was the plain stubbornness to sit in that hospital alone, to hold a 5-year-old's hand through the worst day of both our lives and not break. If I could put one thing in your pocket, it's this. Being kind is not the same as being available for withdrawal. I spent decades confusing the two, and the people who loved the convenience of me were never going to correct my math. Decency means you don't leave wreckage behind you. Clear sight means you see who's actually drowning and who's just enjoying the view from your raft. And grit means you can sit in the hardest room of your life and still stand up when the surgeon says your child made it. I think about Felix on that beach near Tofino, his scar a thin pale line, screaming with joy at a whale. And I understand now that my worth was never the number on the check. It was the hand I never let go of. The transfers are over. The lights in my house are mine again. And the quiet, that's the loudest thing I own.